The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Now broadcasting from the Right to Offend Media Studios in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, art, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report Live with Sam Whitfield.
But giving offense is good. In fact, it's essential.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Whitfield Report. I am your host, Sam Whitfield, recording here at, actually, I'm live tonight here at Right to Offend Media Studios in South Florida. And, yeah, usually I don't do an impromptu show like this, ladies and gentlemen. But, we've had a couple of those for the last few weeks, and I think it's going to work out because we are trying to get more, live stream time here on Rumble to get into the partner program. So, that's one of the reasons why I decided to do a live show tonight. So that kind of, turned out to be practical. The other reason is, just to be honest, I had a few guests that, one guest canceled on me, kind of like last minute over the weekend. We were supposed to record an interview on, I think it was Saturday, and then this person texted me and said that they couldn't make it, so we've had to reschedule, and stuff happens. And then I was supposed to have another guest on to do a show tonight, but that never there were just technical issues and things didn't come together. But at any rate, I've been doing this, I've been podcasting for almost 18 years now, ladies and gentlemen. Can you believe that? In fact, this month, March 25th, will be the anniversary of when I started podcasting. March 25th, 2008 was the debut of my very first podcast, the Whitfield Nation. And, obviously the show has grown and evolved massively since then and taken all sorts of, various turns. Some mostly for the better. There were a few years like around 2020 when things kind of went downhill. But we've been back and, we've been doing solid programming in the last few weeks. And usually I try and have, a show perfectly prepared. But every once in a while, folks, and tonight is one of those nights, every once in a while, your plans for the show don't go, according to plan. And so you've got to improvise. And so, not 30 minutes ago, I figured out that tonight was going to be one of those nights. I had to improvise, and boy, did I ever. We have an exciting, kind of chilled out, stream for tonight, in which I cover the legacy of Andrew Breitbart. Now, the reason why I'm covering Andrew Breitbart, for those of you who don't know who Andrew Breitbart is, we'll get more into that in a sec, but just kind of as a brief primer, Andrew Breitbart was the founder of Breitbart News, which a lot of people, probably if you're in the political circle or media circle, you most likely know what Breitbart News is. But there are a lot of people who don't know who Andrew Breitbart was himself. And Andrew Breitbart, I would say, was really one of the first like modern conservative political commentators. And by modern, I mean like super modern, like social media. He was like one of the first, conservative news personalities who, when Twitter and Facebook first started back in the, mid 2000s, he was one of the first people to really utilize the internet to spread conservative ideas and communicate them effectively to people. And he was a Gen Xer. And so, unlike a lot of baby boomers who didn't really understand how to utilize the internet properly and still don't, he was one of the first, conservative individuals out there to really say, hey, conservatives have to, utilize the internet effectively because the left has dominated the mainstream media and they're going to dominate the web if we don't get on there, soon and really learn how to utilize it properly. And he was absolutely right. And I'm oversimplifying kind of who Breitbart was. There was a lot more to it, obviously, but that's just kind of a quick primer. And sadly, Andrew Breitbart passed away in 2012, right before the right before the election that would have eventually become Romney versus Obama. And at the time when he passed away, he actually passed away on March 1st of 2012. Which is actually he passed away a month before his birthday, actually. He his birthday was in February, and then on February 1st, and then he literally passed away like a month later. And I think he was only 45 if I remember correctly, but anyway, uh he matters to me personally. He's a hero of mine because um as many of you know by now, I was one of the first conservatives to kind of, utilize podcasting, uh, to the effect that I do. And Andrew Breitbart was also one of the first conservatives to really utilize podcasting. Him and I both were really before anyone knew what the, podcasting or internet radio, space even was. A lot of people didn't even know what podcast was. This was back in the days when people still had literal iPods, and you would have to, sync them manually. Or if you wanted to do a live stream show like this, there was no video; it was audio only. For a good chunk of the 2000s and really up until like 2015 to 2016 ish, video live streaming like this was not a thing. And so, Breitbart and I both were kind of like pioneers of early internet radio. And I never met him. Unfortunately, I never interviewed him on the Whitfield Report back then. That was something I always wanted to do. Or back then, it was called the Whitfield Analysis. That was the name of my show back then. I unfortunately never had him on, but as people who are familiar with my lore know by now, my first big break was interviewing Ben Shapiro on the Whitfield analysis. And a lot of people know that, but what a lot of people who haven't listened to that interview, what they might not know is my entire interview with Ben Shapiro from back then was literally all about uh, you know, Andrew Breitbart and what Ben's experience of working for Andrew Breitbart was, because Ben Shapiro, before the Daily Wire started, he was actually like assistant editor at large of Breitbart News. And so, whenever you hear Ben mention Andrew, most likely he's referring to Andrew Breitbart. And I've mentioned Andrew Breitbart multiple times throughout the years, and I've done shows on him before, ladies and gentlemen, but it's been quite a while. I don't think I've done a show on him since we moved the Whitfield Report over to Right to Fund Media. So there's a whole new audience, that isn't really familiar with Andrew Breitbart, or they might be, but they might need a refresher as to his, legacy and his relevance. And Andrew Breitbart's legacy, in my opinion, is still very strong in the conservative movement. It might not be directly attributed to him, but his legacy is still there in many ways. And so, there have been a lot of people who have asked me and who have asked Max, because we do talk about Andrew Breitbart on the show. I always get the question of, well, Sam, who is Andrew Breitbart? And so, I figured I've kind of meaning to do a type of stream like this for a while, where I dive into Breitbart's history and legacy. And I just kind of figured that I would actually play some clips for you guys and, explain and kind of dive into his legacy a bit tonight for the folks at home. So it should be a pretty, chill and layback podcast, but fun nonetheless. But before we get started, folks, I have two things to promote to you fine folks. First and foremost, folks, we are less than a month away now from the release of my next thriller in the Shadows of Deception universe, Night of the Vigilante, which focuses on the Jason Miller character. John Ryder does make a cameo in this, but Night of the Vigilante is more of like a prequel / sequel to John Ryder books 1 through 3 simultaneously. And that'll make more sense, once the book comes out and you guys can read it. Several people have already read advanced reader copies, and I'm told by multiple people that this is that this is the best work I've done today. And, not to brag, but I tend to agree that this is my best work today. Of course, one of the secrets to being an author, and really it's not so secret, ladies and gentlemen, but one of the things is with every book release, you would always hope as an author that your latest release is your best work yet, because that means that you're improving and whatnot. And so very humbled that people like this, and I hope that you folks, the readers at home, will enjoy this too. So Night of the Vigilante is available for pre-order on Amazon right now as an ebook. It will be available in paperback, ebook, and Audible format too, all on the same day on March 25th. So we may do a celebration stream for that. Super looking forward to it. And again, thanks to all the advanced readers who submitted, feedback and said some really, kind words. I'll have some of their feedback and blurbs at the beginning of the book once I get the final copy, submitted. Going to be working on final edits for this, in the next couple weeks before, the book goes out. But yeah, really just excited to get this out to you. And, thanks to everyone who has been purchasing Shadows of Deception and Blood Ties as well, folks. I'm actually pleasantly surprised how Blood Ties has kind of, it's really taken off at the beginning of this year. I released it in November of 24, kind of right before Thanksgiving. And in hindsight, that might have been a bad time to release it, but like at the beginning of the year, a lot of, I guess, indie pulp noir publications started to kind of pick it up, and people started to review copies of Blood Ties, and they really liked it. So, again, thanks to all the readers and people have supported my work with the Shadows of Deception saga and Blood Ties. And now with Night of the Vigilante, like I said, it's going to be terrific. And I hope you guys enjoy reading this one as much as I enjoyed writing it. It took me about a year to complete this one in total, but I think you all will really enjoy it. Also, before we get into tonight's show, I also want to give a shout out to my friend and fellow author Luke Gozich, who he just released his latest novel as well, Fire in the Tall Grass. A couple of you guys probably saw me promote this on Instagram over the weekend, but I started reading it. Haven't finished it yet, but it's a quick novel, and if you're familiar with Luke's work, you know that he's really good at crafting, really just like pure pulp and pure adventure fiction. If you like Indiana Jones type stuff, if you like 1923, any of those like explorer type books, this is right up your alley. And Luke has always been really supportive of all my work, and I've had him on the podcast twice, and he's one of the co-hosts of the Men's Adventure Fiction. He's always hyping me up with everything he does, so I'm happy to give him a shout out. Check this out. Fire in the Tall Grass, available in paperback and ebook, and yeah, he's doing great work. Him and Nathaniel both, and really all of us in the men's adventure fiction community. So honored to call him a friend and honored to promote his work as well. But anyway, folks, I see people are starting to filter in here a bit. So with all the promo for the books and whatnot out of the way, let's go on to our I wouldn't really say our guest of honor, but our person of honor for tonight's show, Andrew Breitbart. And there are so many places that we could start. But I want to start off by playing a few minutes of this interview here that Breitbart did with the Hoover Institution, in which Andrew Breitbart talks about the media war and about how the mainstream media is they're no longer neutral, folks. They're actively trying to not only subvert conservative ideas, but just crush them in general. And what's significant about this, folks, is looking back at this, from like a 2025 perspective, most of the members of the audience are like, well, yeah, no shit, Sam. The mainstream media has always been, really slanted to the left, and they've always been in the bag for the Democrats and whatnot. This is common knowledge. But this interview, folks, is from back in, well, I mean, this video is 13 years ago. So,
Of investigative news.
So yeah, let me actually see what the upload date on this is, if it has anything, if it actually has the date. Okay, so this interview that Andrew Breitbart does is from June 14th of 2011. So quite a number of years ago at this point, folks. And there were a lot of people back then who, like, those of us who were hardcore, like, Rush Limbaugh listeners, we already knew of the media's bias against conservatives. And, now with the whole USAID thing, we now know that, like, a lot of these corporate media entities literally were doing the will of government institutions. But back in, 2011, very few people, like, you know, they didn't know that, or they would just dismiss it outright. And Andrew Breitbart here, this is another guy, this is the interviewer, but Andrew Breitbart, who you'll see in just a sec, was really the first one to really acknowledge just how bad the mainstream media's bias and corruption is. So let's take a listen.
Websites including Breitbart.com, Breitbart.tv, big government, big Hollywood, big journalism, and big peace. Big cosmos is surely on the boards.
I need to have a big synthesis and get it down to one portal.
Andrew Breitbart's new book, Righteous Indignation, Excuse Me While I Save the World. Andrew Breitbart.
Which, by the way, Righteous Indignation was one of the best books that I read politically. I actually read Righteous Indignation after Andrew passed away. Unfortunately, I read it. Actually, now that I think about it, I read Righteous Indignation 11 years ago this month, actually. And Breitbart in that book, it's semi-autobiographical, but he also, he talks a lot about his, transformation from being a liberal to being a conservative, and also fighting the media, war landscape. And he makes a lot of predictions in that book and in this interview that have not only come to pass, since his passing, but like have come to pass in spades. So, his book is a great read, even though it's, like 15 years old at this point, and this interview is great. So, okay, I'll shut up and let Andrew talk for a bit here, because what he is saying will be extremely relevant and still very timely to today, I think.
Bart, welcome.
Thank you.
The Liberal Grows Up, segment 1. You describe in Righteous Indignation a privileged upbringing in Southern California, exclusive schools, very comfortable circumstances. Your parents weren't particularly political, but they were more or less conservative. And then this, I'm quoting from the book. Through some form of osmosis, I considered myself a liberal. How come?
My parents didn't fight for to maintain what it was they were teaching me through their deeds and their acts. They are a very silent generation. I grew up around with friends who had younger baby boomer parents, and they were very forthright in their politics. They would go to their rock concerts. They'd go to their Rock for Kampuchea. They'd fly to Philadelphia for Live Aid. And I remember my mother would watch Lawrence Welk on Saturday nights. The juxtaposition of...
That's not a hard choice. You want where the action was.
It was, and so as much as I loved my parents, the flow towards my friends and their parents' way of life and way of thinking was the most natural thing in the world.
Okay.
I loved my parents, but rejecting their orthodoxy was simple.
Once again, from Righteous Indignation, a turning point. You're in New Orleans, you're studying at Tulane, you're sitting down for a math exam, quote, and you're not doing well. I started to consider that maybe years of skating by, recklessly expecting everything to work out, had been exactly the wrong approach to derivatives. Nice sentence, by the way. Apparently, I realized sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes you do have to make it work out, which means that values do matter, close quote. Andrew, you're raised in a conservative family and come out a liberal. You go to what you called, I don't have experience of Tulane, but I have no reason to doubt you.
It's any humanities department USA, and I hate to do this to Tulane because I'd love to be invited back there to speak to the students, to tell them about an alternative approach.
I guarantee it lies in your future at some point. Somebody will fund a trip to Tulane. But it's a liberal, it's an American university of its time, and you come out of that a conservative. How did this happen?
Well,
you are swimming against
I
was
an American Studies major, and I really did think that when I chose that, that it would be reading about the Constitution, the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, Mark Twain, and sort of a benign approach towards the American experience. And I didn't realize this until afterwards, because I can say this with absolute authority. Had I not graduated, had I not been given my diploma, it would have only been me to blame. I went in New Orleans, do as the New Orleanians. I really did partake in the culture down there, and I can't believe I did graduate. But there was a point where
Mardi Gras every night for Andrew Breitbart.
It was, and it was as depressing as it was ecstatic and fun. It was a prison of decadence, and it was 4 years of nonstop where people would come and visit me from my former life in Los Angeles, and they'd leave saying it was the best time of their lives. And as they'd get on the plane to depart the Bacchanalia, I would whisper under my breath, "Please take me with you." Because it was Groundhog Day. It was every single. It was the It was the Monday nights. It was the Monday nights when people would say, "Do you want to go out?" And I said, "Nah, I think I'm going to stay in and study." And then 15 minutes later, I'd go out and I'd meet them. So I really didn't. I didn't dedicate myself to academia, and it was only after I graduated when I got a letter or an email, I don't remember the exact year, I think it was around 1994, asking me to assess my degree. You know, it was
self-assessment,
an assessment of it. And I started to look through the books, wondering, what was that? What was that education? And what I remember was, to synthesize it, I've watched C-SPAN my entire life. And I remember I've watched Noam Chomsky talk in this strange jargon that is not accessible to the average person. And I remember thinking to myself, there was a period there in my American Studies class where I was hearing the word deconstruction and semiotics a bit too many times. And I'm like, what's going on here? What is this language? What are they trying to do? And I started to analyze the courses that I took, and I realized that it was cultural Marxist theory. I'm like, this is kind of strange. I thought that this was supposed to be American studies, not German, Italian, nihilistic theory.
So in a way, it's just as well that you were debauched all 4 years.
That's the whole point of that chapter, is that I think alcohol saved me.
You go, I don't want my own college-age children to hear that line. I'll edit that line out from the version they see. After Tulane, you go back to Los Angeles and scrape around. You end up waiting table. You get a job as a courier at a production company, and an important moment comes when you know the man who will become your father-in-law, the comedian and actor Orson Bean, known to people of a certain generation from To Tell the Truth, known to people of another generation from Desperate Housewives. And here, I'll just quote to you from Righteous Indignation. One day I asked Orson why he had Rush Limbaugh's book, The Way Things Ought to Be, on his shelf. I was convinced to the core of my being that Rush Limbaugh was a Nazi, anti-black, anti-Jewish, and anti-all things decent. Orson simply suggested that I listen to him again. And what happened when you did?
Okay, so I want to kind of jump in here real quick just to do commentary. So yeah, I mean, in summary, Andrew is basically saying that, he grew up in a conservative family, but, as most kids do, and particularly of, Gen X, of his generation, who rebelled, and he was in Los Angeles in the 1980s, growing up, and so everyone around him was just kind of a liberal by default. Now, I don't know about you folks, but that seems very similar even to today. A lot of conservatives now who listen to our content on Right to Offend Media, some of them, like myself, have always been more conservative, but a lot of, I have a lot of friends who are conservatives who, up until the Trump era, they grew up just being liberals by default. And they think that this is like somehow new and unique, that people are, coming to conservatism because of Trump. But no, Breitbart here is, saying that he was a liberal by default, and then he listened to Rush Limbaugh, and he was told that Rush Limbaugh was evil, but then he started listening to him again, and things started to change. So, yeah, continuing on.
Well, it was the 1992 election cycle, and at that point, I thought I was a liberal, and I started listening to Rush simply because my alternative radio station had turned into a grunge rock festival. I loathed Kurt Cobain and Eddie Vedder so much that I switched to the AM dial out of desperation. And so that's really, I have to thank grunge music for turning me into a conservative. And I remember the first month.
True story. He talks about that in the book too. And that was another thing that, like, I remember talking when I interviewed Ben Shapiro all those years ago now. That was one thing I asked, is that really true about, grunge music turning Andrew into a conservative? And Andrew and Ben says to me, well, yes, Sam, of course it's true that, grunge music was what turned Andrew into a conservative. He said it way faster, by the way, too. He said it in like 5 milliseconds or something like that. But yeah, that is kind of funny, though, that grunge music did turn Andrew into a conservative.
Or two, thinking, well, I may not agree with his politics, but at no point have I heard him intimate anything that appears to be racist, sexist, or homophobic. And I started to ask people around me, have you ever listened to this Rush Limbaugh creature? And they said, yes, he's a racist, sexist, and a homophobe. I said, okay, I need some help here because I've been listening now for months as I'm driving on LA freeways delivering scripts. He's not. He's not. And what I realized is I believed to the core of my being that I had listened to him. If you had given me a lie detector test, I promise you I would have passed, because with conviction, the culture, the 60 Minutes report on him, all of the things that I've been told reflected that negative stereotype. But I, in fact, had never assessed him myself, and recognizing that the mainstream media doesn't necessarily tell you the truth or tells you the truth from its ideological standpoint became this panacea for me, where I started to challenge the mainstream media.
Segment 2, the Democrat media complex. Again.
So again, and I've talked about this before when I've done tribute shows to Rush Limbaugh. But, again, so keep in mind, Andrew Breitbart has graduated from college, and he's delivering scripts. It's the 1992 election. I was born in 95, so I don't remember much of the 90s. But I am old enough to remember, like, the very early to kind of remember, like, the late 90s and early 2000s. The internet in the 90s, really internet 1.0 really didn't even start until 1995. So prior to 95, 94, if we really want to get specific, but up until 94, 95, the internet wasn't really a thing like we know of it today. And so radio and television media, that was still kind of that was still very much the prevailing media consumption. And so the corporate media even back then was saying that Rush was a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, all of that. 35 plus years ago, almost. And yet, people like Andrew who were actually listening to Rush were saying, hang on, that's not true. And now we kind of take it for granted that the left labels everyone as a bigot, a sexist, homophobe. But my point being, folks, is nothing has changed in the last 30 some odd years. It's the hardcore left has always been like this, folks. Andrew, in more modern times being like 2010, 2011, was really kind of the one to point this out, though. So, yeah.
Again, from Righteous Indignation, Limbaugh, like the professor I always wanted but never had, created a vivid mental picture of the architecture of a world that I resided in but couldn't see completely, the Democrat media complex. Describe the architecture.
Well, it's the Matrix. I mean, it really, for me, it was, if you've ever been to Coney Island and you see those holograms where there's a picture of the Empire State Building and you're supposed to squint, and you squint and you squint and you can't see it, but eventually you see the Eiffel Tower. And you're like, and then once you see the Eiffel Tower, you can't not see the Eiffel Tower. And through every day, Rush Limbaugh analyzing the source material of the world, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, ABC, CBS, and NBC, he was able to create for me a very vivid picture that the people who were allegedly objective and neutral reporters and journalists were the front line of the political battle. and they used their objectivity as their greatest weapon, because they were telling young impressionable people like me who believed in Woodward and Bernstein and who believed in Walter Cronkite, wait a second, you're telling me that perhaps ideology played a role in how they interpreted stories or how they chose one story over the other. And so then the Matrix or the Democrat media complex became everything to me. In fact, when discussing politics, I always turn it back to the complex. It's always about seeing the world and hoping that people see the Eiffel Tower.
So this is, you're listening to Limbaugh in 92 during that election cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you remain. What I'm getting at here is, who is the Democrat media complex then, and who is the Democrat media complex now? What's changed? What's changed?
Other than much has changed, actually, and that's the new media, and that's the whole point of this entire book.
Right.
Is that Rush took the moribund AM dial, and at the end of the day was a media critic, but he was a relentless media critic, and he was exposing to. He wasn't just working with ditto heads. If ditto heads were what Rush Limbaugh were about, they could care less about. Just let him be and talk to the yokels out there in the hinterlands. They're worried about Andrew Breitbarts of the world, people that would actually listen to what he has to say and awaken people so that they can see that these people are using the media as a way to reinforce a herd mentality within the culture. And so what I see now is they used to get away with it. Rush Limbaugh took the moribund AM dial, and now it's a flourishing realm where countless people, from Michael Medved to Dennis Prager to Sean Hannity, are showing people or granting people a perspective or the alternative reality from the mainstream media. And Matt Drudge comes along in 1995, and he tells people, hey, look, you don't need to have an AM radio station, which costs a lot of money, and you have to have a certain skill set. He said, look, if you have a modem and a computer, you can enter this thing. We're now 20 plus years into this new media revolution, and the difference is there is open media warfare now between Katie Couric and the Rush Limbaughs and the Matt Drudges of the world. We are a polarized nation. This is a civil war based upon communication.
Okay, so let me take.
So, and on that note, I want to kind of pause here because, again, keep in mind, this interview that Breitbart did was from 2011, okay? And back then, Breitbart was talking about the internet information warfare, basically, right? And this was back in 2011. Now, to give you some perspective, Facebook and Twitter were not, they had their biases, but they weren't actually censoring the way that they were prior to Elon Musk, taking over Twitter. It really is unfortunate that Andrew passed away in 2012. I mean, it's unfortunate in, obviously many ways. It's unfortunate for his children and his family and whatnot, and it's unfortunate that, that we lost one of our great conservative thought leaders. But Andrew Breitbart died, unfortunately just before Gamergate and kind of the culture war of 2014 and 15, which ushered in the era of Trump. And I know I've asked this before on the show, but there are moments where I genuinely do wonder, and what Andrew Breitbart would have thought of, Gamergate and the culture war surrounding that, and what would he have thought of the Trump 2016 revolution, and and now again with the Biden election quote unquote. And what would Andrew think of platforms like Rumble and whatnot? And now I have to include Rush Limbaugh in that category too, because Rush has passed away too, right? But again, Andrew Breitbart was just so far ahead of the time. He could be talking about things today as far as the media warfare goes. It really is kind of mind-boggling to me in some ways.
Here, again, quoting from Righteous Indignation, I, Andrew Breitbart, I'm at war with the mainstream media. I'm at war with the mainstream media because they portray themselves as objective observers of reality when they're hacks who think they can destroy everything America stands for. But shouldn't you relax? Things are working out. Things are working out. There's Fox News. There's Rush Limbaugh. There are all kinds of alternative.
That's not enough. That's not enough. That's not enough. This is what angers me so about the.
That's what I want to know. Why aren't you more relaxed? We're 20 years into it, just as you said. Why don't you say, "Oh, okay, I'll take a." I'm going to spend half my time on the beach.
Now, again, this is really interesting, and he was absolutely right then. And I guarantee you, if he were alive, today, he would still be saying the same thing. And the gentleman who is interviewing him is doing a great job. I don't remember this guy's name, but there were a lot of conservatives, and I remember kind of this attitude, back then. But there were conservatives like me and like Andrew Breitbart who were constantly pushing conservatives to online, and then there were other conservatives like this gentleman at the Hoover Institution who were saying, "Oh, Sam, we already have Fox News and we already have AM radio. That's what we need." Well, no, we need the we need the internet, and no, it's not enough that we just have the college Republicans. We need young conservative voices out there, which is why I was doing what I was doing at the time, because no one was speaking to, at the time, the conservative youth of America. I wouldn't go so far as to say I was the only one doing it, because there were others, like my friend Jason Veely and a few others at the time, but there were only 4 or 5 of us, right? And now there are through Turning Point USA and whatnot, there's a lot more access to young conservatives, which I'm glad. It's awesome to see, but when people say that next gen conservative, my old brand really was one of the trailblazers for young conservatives, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. And Andrew Breitbart was absolutely right. It wasn't enough that we had Fox News and talk radio. And I was saying, even just a few years ago, because I remember people were really excited that we had, True Social and websites like Minds and whatnot, and websites like Rumble. And I would even say now it's not enough. We need more platforms. Rumble is doing a great job of taking it on YouTube. So is Odyssey. But really, without Twitter/X under Elon Musk, I don't think either of those platforms would really have the success that they are now. I think I really, when people say that Elon Musk saved free speech through purchasing Twitter, I don't think that they're necessarily wrong. And the other thing too is people want to talk like Joe Rogan, how he's shifted more to the right. Andrew Breitbart was kind of Joe Rogan in a sense before Joe Rogan, came to the right. Because, Joe used to be a default liberal and he's come more to, the conservative side of things, and that was where Andrew was. But yeah, so I want to go back a little bit, just to kind of start this quote because it is interesting. So yeah.
The mainstream media, because they portray themselves as objective observers of reality when they're hacks who think they can destroy everything America stands for. But shouldn't you relax? Things are working out. Things are working out. There's Fox News, there's Rush Limbaugh, there are all kinds of alternative.
That's not enough. That's not enough. That's not enough. This is what angers me so about the.
That's what I want to know. Why aren't you more relaxed? We're 20 years into it, just as you said. Why don't you say, "Oh, okay, I'll take a." I'm going to spend half my time on the beach in Santa Monica.
Because AM radio, an op-ed column, and Fox News is not enough. The big.
What do you want? What do you want?
I want a center-right nation to fight for its soul, and its soul is represented in the arts. Its soul is represented in a world in which media is everything. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. It's tinny. It's not robust. It's not Avatar. I want Avatar. I want the right to enter the world of media to the extent and invest in media the way that the left does. George Soros is throwing money like crazy.
You want an NPR?
I want everything. I want us. Right. They have an NPR. They're so slick in understanding how important media is. They've convinced the government to pay them to propagate their worldview. How come we're not fighting for money to propagate our worldview? Because we don't believe in it. Okay, then use the free market to convey the same ideas with the same level of sophistication and excellence that NPR does, because they are superior at what they do, just as Jon Stewart is superior at what he does. I grant Hollywood and the experts in propaganda for what they do.
You admit that they're good. In fact, that's what annoys you.
That it annoys me, and it annoys that our side does not commit to this battle.
All right. Segment 3. Let's go through your.
And again, it really, again, this is one of the frustrating things about Breitbart has to go with what he did, because this is all stuff, what Breitbart is saying in 2011 is all stuff that Trump was saying later in 2016, and things that I was saying. And, fortunately, to some extent, conservatives have learned, to, go out there and flood, the market with our new media. We're on more of a level playing field than we were 10 years ago. So, progress is progress, right? But Andrew's right that the left at the time was like taking over. They dominated the culture war, and conservatives at the time, in 2012 and prior, they really did not care about the culture war. It wasn't important at all to them. They were indifferent to it. And in fact, that was one of the things too, when Antifa and the Occupy Wall Street crowd, as they were known then, when those people started to show up, all these conservatives, were kind of wringing their hands, wondering where all of these people came from. And it was young people who, they were brainwashed to be left, to be super far left, because that's what the culture had told them. So yeah, it makes, perfect sense. But yeah, that's, again, Breitbart hits the nail on the head there.
The background of your life here in fighting this fight that you've just described. Righteous indignation. I intentionally co-created, this is a little tricky problem here for you, Andrew. I intentionally co-created the Huffington Post I, Andrew Breitbart, intentionally co-created the Huffington Post in order to grant the hard left a place in the blogosphere to express itself. Okay, explain yourself.
I had been Ariana Huffington's researcher up until the point where she converted on a dime. One day
You knew Ariana when she was still conservative.
Oh, absolutely. She dug up Larry Lawrence from Arlington National Cemetery. Thank you,
Explain
Ariana.
Larry Lawrence. Larry Lawrence was ambassador.
Ambassador from Switzerland, Clinton's #1 donor, and he granted him a waiver to be in Arlington National Cemetery. He had never even been in the Merchant Marines.
Right.
So she had her credentials.
She got that scandal.
That's right. And I enjoyed being with her when she was a conservative, but I walked out the door when she switched to the left. She came to me 5 years later, 5 years of awkward air kissing at parties that we would run into each other. She came to me after the 2004 election cycle and said, "Do you have any ideas for a website?" And she had a money guy, and we came up with the plan, and it was to create this place where if we could get your friends who you couldn't afford to write for you for free, it would be exceptionally helpful to you. You'll be the queen of the left-wing blogosphere. I said, but from my standpoint, right now, if you want to hear what the actual left has to say, not Katie Couric pretending to be neutral, what the left has to say, all there is on the internet in 2004 is the Daily Kos, where a Peter Robinson could write an op-ed, Bush is the equivalent to Hitler, under a pseudonym, 2 Live Crew 333378. And that constituted a transparency within the media, where, an opaqueness, where these people could write these things. And Kos himself was being put on Meet the Press. And so I said, Ariana, you can become the salon that you have at your house, you can put online.
And it worked.
But the idea was, and I said this to any number of brand name people that I have in my life from the radio, this is going to be crazy, because I've gone to Young America's Foundation, events, and I've talked to these kids, and they know me to be the real deal. I mean what I say, and I say what I mean, and I'm conservative. But I think this is going to be helpful for conservatives, because it will be source material. And the first day that it launched, and I was worried about
it being Huffington Post.
The Huffington Post launched. Right. I was driving up Lincoln Boulevard, worried, because I was getting emails from people saying, "How could you do this?" And I listened to Michael Medved on the first day that it launched, reading aloud Rob Reiner's first day post. Where are the Woodwards and Bernsteins of today to take on George Bush? And he was howling, and I was howling in the car, and I was tearing up, just thinking, this meathead guy who wants to add a dollar, to every cigarette pack to pay for lettuce patches or something. This incoherent guy proved my point. And within I left within a month. And I remember one point, this is my favorite moment. During Katrina, Randall Robinson at the Huffington Post wrote an article 2 days into the flooding that Black people were cannibalizing each other in New Orleans. And Drudge put it up, a link at the Drudge Report. And within 24 hours, Ariana called me up and she said, "You won." I said, "What do you mean you won?" She goes, "We retracted the story." So this was, I swear, I'm a mischievous guy. I to a great extent, I was more inspired.
Okay, Andrew, 20 years or whatever, it's been 15 years later, who's winning in the internet? You've got Ariana just sold the Huffington Post. She's continuing to operate it from AOL, MoveOn.org, Daily. These are still big.
Yeah.
You've got your enormous number, So who's winning?
Well, I think that
conservative and libertarian has been what you hoped?
I think, look, the media is still left of center, and they're trying to buffer up their waning enterprise, their waning monopoly, by giving $315 million to Ariana Huffington. Is AOL coming to me saying, "Wow, you've got this audience of the center right"? It wouldn't dawn on them, because it is the war that I've described. Who's winning? Well, monetarily, they still are controlling the majority of the pieces. But
so there's still something second class.
Yeah, and that is still true today. The left is still winning big time. Maybe not as much, but like I said a few minutes ago, really up until Rumble, there was no, considered video sharing platform. And for those of you watching on Rumble, like, you can see I'm watching this Breitbart video on YouTube, right? And technically, the Whitfield Report is banned on YouTube. So, like, there's not, Rumble video is growing and so is X, but there's not the content library, just in general that YouTube has, that's like 20 plus years now at this point. Some of the videos. So yeah, I mean, as far as like mainstream media, control, the left is still winning, and we still have a lot of work to do. It, as I've said before, it is great that Doge and Elon, that we are starting to make headway, and we did win a major, like, battle against the left, and the left is cannibalizing themselves right now. So we are winning, but we're not done. We still have a lot of headway to make. And everything that Andrew Breitbart is saying about the media war back in 2011 here is extremely relevant. I would say even more so relevant today in 2025.
Second rate
Oh,
about
of
the
course,
conservative.
of course. But what we are winning tactically, because Hannah Giles and James O'Keefe took down Acorn with a high quality video series that cost less than $1,400, which sends a message to the average kid out there that if ABC, CBS, and NBC are not going to cover things and act as a checks and balance against progressive organizations, against the AFL-CIO, against the SEIU, ACORN, other community organizing groups, then we can do it ourselves. And we're having an effect going around the Democrat media complex, over it, or right straight forward. And my business model is to aim every one of our exposés straight at the mainstream media and say, Katie Couric, you are being dared not to cover this.
All right. Segment 4, the theory, of which you have more in this book than I'd expected. Righteous indignation. A lot gets explained here. Marx and Hegel had paved the way for the progressives, who in turn had paved the way for the Frankfurt School, who had then attacked the American way of life by pushing cultural Marxism through critical theory.
Now, pay attention here, ladies and gentlemen, because what Breitbart is about to explain here, he basically explains woke culture and woke ideology before it's called woke ideology. All woke ideology is, it's just cultural Marxism. That's all it is. But obviously the left isn't going, obviously they're not going to say it's cultural Marxism because that would make them look bad. So, the left changed it. Oh, we're woke. We're awake to the social injustices of the world. No, you're just cultural Marxists and communists at the end of the day. And yeah, so basically Andrew's about to deconstruct, I guess, woke culture as we now know it back in 2011.
There's a lot going on there. Very briefly, what's the Frankfurt School, and why should anyone watching this interview care?
Okay, first of all, anyone that reads this book is going to laugh, and they're going to cry, and they're going to get Andrew in all of his zany different multiple layers. But there's one chapter that is like putting the medicine in the sherbet in order to get your kid to take it, in order to get rid of his fever. And to me, my one discovery, my one great epiphany, my one aha moment that I said, I got it. I see what exactly happened with in this country. The Frankfurt School were emigres from
Germany, Austria.
Germany.
Mm-hmm.
It was the equivalent of this, the Hoover Institution. What the Hoover Institution is to Stanford University, the Frankfurt School was a think tank at the University of Frankfurt, and they were social scientists like Herbert Marcuse, Antonio Gramsci, Horkheimer, Adorno. These were all a bunch of guys in the middle of World War II who had suffered in Europe, 2 world wars in a row. And they had been fighting, they had been fighting the Nazis, and they were trying to figure out another aspect of how to how to spread Marxism around the world. You could go to Bolivia, you could go to Bulgaria, and you could go to the peasant class, and you could say, let's flip this place. The Marxist-Stallman argument of getting the workers to get upset at the owners was very easy, but not in America, where the middle class was invested in their productivity, invested in the concept that they could have their own small little American dream, a white picket fence, that they could invent something and go from one generation being dirt poor to being an owner within a very quick period of time. And what these guys figured out when they came to the United States, and Adorno is the one that drives me the most crazy. He came out to California, and I think it was Bertolt Brecht, the East German playwright, moved to Santa Monica in the 1940s at the height of the Golden Age. Think about this. These guys left Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy to come to California in the 1940s, and they lived by the beach, and they were depressed by the relentless cheeriness, the productivity, and the capitalism that they witnessed around them. And they came up with at the end of the day, we could call it cultural Marxism, but at the end of the day, we experience it on a day-to-day basis. And by that, I mean a minute-by-minute, second-by-second basis. It's political correctness and it's multiculturalism. And what it took was this amazing concept of e pluribus unum, where everybody comes here and contributes to this, everybody becomes an American and contributes, but we have a common culture, we have a common border, a common mindset. What they did was take the haves versus have-nots friction and translated it into oppressor versus the oppressed. And
this got taken up by faculties across the country. That's the point of the Frankfurt School and the progressivism. It becomes embraced by 60s
post-structuralism
academics.
Post-structuralism, queer studies, African American studies, all of that is pitting people against each other. It is anti-American to its core.
If Marcuse was I'm quoting again from Righteous Indignation, if Marcuse was the Jesus of the New Left, then Saul Alinsky was his St. Paul. Again, let me just put it to you in simple terms. Who's Saul Alinsky, and why should anyone watching this interview care?
Well, Hillary Clinton wrote her senior thesis on Saul Alinsky at Wellesley. Barack Obama is an acolyte of Saul Alinsky. He created the concept of community organizing. And what he did, as I argue in this book, is he took all of this ethereal claptrap, this Noam Chomsky-like jargon that the average person couldn't understand.
Herbert Marcuse is very hard to read.
Right. It's all impossible to read. But he was able to translate this cultural Marxist down to a series of rules and a mindset, a warrior mindset, where the critical theory was like, take on your enemy, take him directly on, destroy that person. He applied critical theory down to the street war level. And I would argue that the Katie Courics of the world, the Chris Matthews of the world, Rachel Maddow, and Keith Olbermann, unbeknownst even to themselves, are studied in the tactics of Alinsky.
Segment 5. The Breitbart, Pragmatic Primer for Realistic Revolutionaries. Righteous Indignation. My transformation from empty-headed, hard to believe you were ever empty-headed, but we'll let you get away with that. My transformation from empty-headed, pop culture-infused, talking points parroting liberal to new media warrior took me 4 decades. But those years in the wilderness taught me some basic rules that I've applied steadily and steadfastly and that are bearing tremendous results, close quote. So you then present your own rules to answer Saul Alinsky's rules. Don't be afraid to go into enemy territory. What do you mean by that?
I can't tell you how many people tell me, don't go onto the Bill Maher show.
Take it right to them.
Oh, it's the best. And first of all, I've had my greatest successes because I live in West Los Angeles. My life is taking it to them. I live in West Los Angeles. I live amid, the Hollywood rubble. And when I do a Bill Maher show and I go to Starbucks the next morning and the barista says, I saw you on TV last night and I didn't like how the audience was booing you before you finished your sentences. And I thought that you made an interesting point. Nobody sought me out to reclaim me on behalf of my parents, not even my parents. I tripped upon conservatism. My goal is to go out there and find someone else like me who'd never even known what conservatism was and say, hey, maybe I.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is essentially what I've been doing for the past, 17, 18 years almost now. That's what Right to Offend Media is doing pretty much. We might not be like hard line conservative in the traditional sense, but our entire ethos has been, hey, what if there's, a different opinion other than the far left that's also like not quite, the religious right either. But it's not moderate to the point where people are fence sitting. Yeah, what Breitbart was doing is essentially what we've been doing, especially the last few years here on Right to Offend Media, all along on all of our shows. Just last night, even on Bits and Bones, Morpheus, Tim and I, we were talking, video game, like the Culture War, it's gotten into video games, for the past 10 years. It's absurd. It's absurd that video game culture even had to, become a target. It absolutely is absurd. It's ridiculous that, video gaming went woke and, now games are $70 and I guess, according to Morpheus last night, I guess Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be like $100 for the base game alone, which you guys are pissing me off when you started to increase the price of games to $70. But $100, I think you're gonna be pissing off a lot of gamers with that bullshit, probably. But yeah, again, the culture war in gaming and just in media in general has gotten absurd. And so what we're doing at Right to Offend Media, what Andrew Breitbart was doing in his lifetime was to essentially say, hey, there is another option besides the far left. And he did it in a way that at the time nobody else was doing. Except for me and a few others. But, again, I was a kid. I didn't have the, the resources or the money to do what I'm doing right now. And, again, in the mid 2000s, a lot of the resources that we have now weren't even around for independent, journalists and commentators like myself. They just weren't. So, props to Andrew for really being kind of the first trailblazer of the new media. It really is awesome.
Can draw you in. I try and do it through mirth and humor a lot of the times, and in addition to the investigative stuff that I do. I mean, when I say confront these people head on, I mean I went down to the anti-coke rally on rollerblades and a camera to get them to.
That was your stuff? That was your film?
Well, so, the Christian Hartsock was there and I was there, and we both captured unbelievable, pro-violence rhetoric. Let's string up Clarence Thomas, what these progressives had to say, just terrible, terrible stuff.
Be open about your secrets. Be open about your secrets. That's one of your rules. What do you mean?
They're going to, I talk about how I drank a lot in college. It's not a huge revelation. I don't think I drank more than the average person that was in New Orleans at the time. But I always wake up at night thinking that the Alinskyeites, the Sid Blumenthals of the world, the Fenton Communications of the world, the Media Matters of the world, the John Podestas of the world are going to find what your Achilles heel is, and they're going to exploit it. And so why not throw it out there? Barack Obama did exactly that when he wrote in one of his books that he used coke, that he experimented with drugs. You have to do that because they're going to find it. If you own it and you talk about what you learned from that experience, or you show that you're human and not try to pretend to be a perfect public, entity, I think that you're going to fare a zillion times better.
Yeah, that's the other thing. And in my case, like I've been open about the fact, and yeah, people tease me about it and give me crap. But it's like, yeah, I'm the conservative guy who collects Playboy magazine. Like that's my thing. Like I discovered Ron Paul through reading Playboy magazine because there was an article on him in Playboy. Now, obviously, of course, the joke is nobody reads Playboy for the articles. As I like to say, nobody reads Playboy for the articles. But, people come for the woman. People come for the women. Double entendre. And then, stay for the articles. Basically. And so, I've been open about that. More conservatives are open about their, I guess, dirty secrets. And, as long as it's not like too degenerate or anything, people are fine. That's why we're starting to win the culture war against the left, folks. So yeah, everything Andrew is, saying, conservatives are starting to take to heart. He might not be around for it all, but it is great that he, that he's going this route. So
ubiquity is key. What do you mean?
Oh, with the Acorn thing, this was a rare opportunity. James and Hannah come to me with this.
James and Hannah, just out of college, weren't they?
Well, yeah, James is 25, Hannah was 20
right
at the time, so she had not completed college.
And they've gotten on tape Acorn. Go ahead, tell the story. Tell it briefly, though.
They posed as a pimp and a prostitute, trying to start using government funds in many cases through and to get tips on how to avoid paying taxes from Acorn, Obama's vaunted community organizing
so you go down
group.
To the community organizers, Acorn, and get all this stuff on tape.
Yeah, in every office except for one, it was serviced with a smile, and they knew that they couldn't go to ABC, CBS, or NBC. In fact, I actually went to ABC.
Acorn gets government money, right?
They get government money. I knew that this was almost violently important information. That, oh my gosh, it was sort of like back when Drudge did the Lewinsky thing. This is going to cause heads to roll. This is going to be a big deal. How do I get this out there? I guarantee you, even in 2011, my putting that out there at biggovernment.com alone and hoping that it goes viral would not have been the successful strategy they would have sicked their lawyers, the DNC, Acorn, I don't even know.
Okay.
Kirkland and Ellis, they would have
fought back.
They would have fought back and shut it down. The
Okay.
goal was to try and make sure that as many people got their were vested in showing this. One thing I found about the conservative movement is there are a lot of people who are hyper competitive. People that you would think that would be friends with each other.
They believe in competition.
They believe in competition and they fight. So, well, let's, you can, if you're going to let so-and-so over at that station have an access to that video, then we're not going to put it on our station. And I was like, okay, you guys, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to show a story that the mainstream doesn't want you to see. And ubiquity is what made Acorn go down, not that it was on a blog site.
You've got more rules, but our time is limited. Final question. What do you mean in your pragmatic primer for realistic revolutionaries and righteous indignation by believe in the audacity of hope?
Well, my business partner hates this about me because every now and then I will compare myself to Don Quixote because he doesn't like
tilting at windmills.
Yeah, that's right. But
right.
I do believe that many of the things that I've accomplished have had, such as taking on the complex. What most of AM talk radio does simply criticizes it from afar. When I saw what they did to Clarence Thomas, and you juxtapose what they did to Clarence Thomas next to anointing Bill Clinton for exhibiting the same behavior that they claimed that Thomas was guilty of, when you see how they treat the Tea Party, they're default racist. They have to disprove their racism. I believe that the natural organism that is the Democrat media complex behaves oftentimes in an evil fashion. My goal is to destroy the mainstream media as we currently know it so that it is more equitable, so that it is more fair. It seems like an outrageous goal. I'm not sure that there's a business model that's going to make it so that I'm going to have Rupert Murdoch-like money, but I hope that my children's generation exists in a more fair and equitable media. And the first thing that we're going to have to get rid of is this fake declaration of objectivity and neutrality. That is a big lie. We need to move towards something that is a more mature version of what we have now, more like the UK. In Britain, the newspapers are avowedly left and right.
You know what you're getting,
and they're mature about it. We are just going through the.
Well, I hate to say, Andrew, and obviously, sadly, you're no longer here, but yeah, Britain is no longer objective like that. It really is sad to see. And yeah, I mean, I Andrew mentioned Rupert Murdoch, but clearly, I think between Trump and Musk now, we have that signal that we didn't have back then. So again, huge. We have made huge strides. Do not get me wrong on that. But like I said, we still have a lot of work to do. So that's pretty much the conclusion, to this, interview here. Now there's a lot more that I could, there's a lot more that I could cover, and I don't want to, take up too much more time, because it is a Monday show, and I like to try and keep these things a little shorter. But anytime I do an Andrew Breitbart show, I've got to point out, I've got to play Andrew Breitbart's CPAC speech, because it is legendary, folks, and I do believe it is one of the, this was his final speech ever that he gave. I think this was his final media appearance, but it is also his, call to arms for conservatives. You know, I would argue that this speech that Andrew gives in 2012 laid the groundwork for the MAGA movement in 2016 and again in 2024. I always play this whenever I'm feeling like down and depressed, and it always uplifts me. And I hope you see why. So yeah, this is Andrew Breitbart's CPAC speech from 2012. I remember witnessing this live and being blown away.
Using the right weight matters. The Body Pod lets you easily understand what is the fastest way to...
Yeah.
I'm looking for you, you Occupy freaks with your glitter bombs. Bring it on! Bring on the glitter. Everything has changed. Everything has changed in the last few years. Conservatives used to take it, and we're not taking it anymore. Just today, as I was planning one of my stupid, silly, funny tricks, I didn't have to, because I got word when I was doing a radio show today that 200 of us went out to the Occupy people to stand toe-to-toe with them to say we are here and we're proud to be conservative and we're not going to take your... I didn't say it. I'm on TV right now. I'm a respectful conservative and my mom is watching. It's over. It's over. Right now, my Twitter feed is already calling me a big fat homosexual. Hello, children at home. No, your dad's not gay. That's how the left rolls. Everybody asks me, why do you retweet? Yeah, why do you do that? I can't tell you how many people I admire. And in fact, there's almost no one in the world who I respect more than Hugh Hewitt. And he took me aside the other day and he said, I don't think you should be doing that, Andrew. I don't think you should be doing that. Well, Professor Hewitt, on this issue, I disagree. Because they've held over our heads with contempt the false narrative of their innate tolerance. The least tolerant people you will ever meet in your entire lives. I know it. I live it every single day. And I retweet it to remind them that I know exactly who they are. This next race, over the next year, everybody asked me, by the way, to come here to speak about tolerance and unity. I'll get to that a little bit later. Because this is my war cry for 2012. You need to join me in this war against the institutional left. This is not your mother's Democratic Party. Duh. Duh. John Podesta, George Soros. This is not your mother's Democratic Party either. You know whose party it is? Well, just this Sunday, thanks to Tucker Carlson, thank you, Tucker, I had the chance of a lifetime to spend an enchanting evening with Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn. A Super Bowl party from hell. People said on Twitter, conservatives, you're palling around with terrorists. I'm like, well, if I'm palling around with terrorists, I'm not the best house guest because I'm still going to destroy everything that they stand for, even though Bill Ayers is the best damned cook I've ever experienced in my entire life. You have no idea how good his succulent ribs were. The butternut squash, the carrot with a hint of ginger soup was extraordinary. The whitefish, the selections of wine at this dinner I had dinner with the 1%, my friends, Bill and Bernadine Dorn.
And that is so true too, ladies and gentlemen. I think this went over people's heads, but I mean, at this point, it's a meme almost on the internet, right? That the lefties who are always complaining the most are also, who are pretending to virtue signal the most, are the ones who are also literally the wealthiest. They are literally the 1%. They're not the ones complaining about egg prices right now. They're not the ones complaining about, gas prices. They're not the ones, complaining about, why are we giving money to Ukraine when we have issues here? Which, by the way, we'll get to Ukraine on Wednesday night, folks. I try and save more of the, the current news and politics stuff for the Wednesday show. We'll get to that on the Wednesday show. Mark my words. But yeah, Breitbart pointing out, wealthy liberal elites back in 2012. And again, it is so unfortunate that, Breitbart makes a goldmine speech like this, and then we get Mitt Romney as the, nominee for 2012. So unfortunately, his speech did not land, in 2012, but it resonated with first-time voters like me in 2016. And again in 2024. So yeah, continuing on.
I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You were charming. I mean that. You were. But then again, so was Ted Bundy. So it doesn't really mean that much in the whole scheme of things. And I have a thesis about who we're fighting against. This is the hard left. I thought when I graduated from college in 1991, I thought that ponytail that I left in my humanities class, that silver ponytail, was just going to retire in the shady acres of academia and go on. I had no idea that these people were absolutely serious about the malarkey that they were teaching me, the post-structuralist, politically correct garbage. Unfortunately, in the year 2004, the radical left basically did a coup d'etat of the Democratic Party and basically kicked a person that 4 years before was called the standard bearer of decency in the Democratic Party, and that was Joe Lieberman. That was over. That was the end of the Democratic Party, and after the 2010 election cycle, DLC went under. It's over. There's no such thing as a moderate Democrat. And so what do we get now in Barack Obama? Well, I've got videos, by the way. This election, we're going to vet him. I've got videos. This election, we're going to vet him from his college days to show you why racial division and class warfare are central to what Hope and Change was sold in 2008. The videos are going to come out. The narrative is going to come out that Barack Obama met a bunch of silver ponytails back in the 1980s, like Bill and Bernadine Dorn, who, equally radical, said one day we're going to have the presidency, and the rest of us slept while they plotted and they plotted and they plotted, and they oversaw hundreds of millions of dollars in the Annenberg Challenge, and they had real money from real capitalists who gave it on to their children and their children's children, and then they become communists. We got to work on that. We got to work on that. That's a parenthesis. Barack Obama is a radical. We should not be afraid to say that. Okay? And Barack Obama was launched from Bill and Bernadine's salon. I've been there. It became a self-evident truth to me that there's zero chance that this incredible chef did not cook many a meal for Barack Obama. Don't tell me ABC, CBS, and NBC I don't have that I can't posit that theory, because it's a self-evident truth. Just like it was a self-evident truth that he was with Jeremiah Wright, and just as it's a self-evident truth that when he was at Harvard, he was advocating for the worst of the worst to join the faculty. Radicals at Beirut on the Charles. And that is who's in the White House, and that's who's outside right now telling you you don't have a right to be here, and who would squelch your free speech just as easily they do at Harvard, Vassar, Yale, Wesleyan. They're a bunch of totalitarian freaks.
They still are, too. They still are.
And they pal around with our friends in the mainstream media. I always thought that the people in the media leaned to the left. I always thought that my neighbors in the media lean to the left. But when they act like a provost at a politically correct university and tell people to shut up, I don't think that they're no longer can they be called objective journalists. They're playing for the other side. They've been part of demonizing good and decent people. They tried to defeat the Tea Party, and when they failed, just like their desire to create a Rush Limbaugh and it failed at Air America, they want what they can't have, and they try to recreate it. They wanted their Tea Party, and what did they create? They created the Occupy movement. What is the Occupy movement, you ask? It's a natural, organic group of people. You've never seen these people before in your life. Wait a sec. These exact people protested against you at the GOP Welcoming Committee in 2008, and two of them were arrested for planting trying to use Molotov cocktails against the police. The radicals against the police, the radicals against you, exactly like Occupy, the same exact people. These are the same exact people that organized Camp Casey at Crawford. That was Occupy Crawford. These are the same exact people that went down the highway at the exact time at the end of the summer when Katrina happened. That was Occupy New Orleans. It's the same radicals. They've been in your life since Senator Obama became part of your vocabulary.
And spoiler alert, I can make an addendum to that. So these are the same people who became Black Lives Matter, at least the radical element. These are the same people who became Antifa. And, these are the same people who have also largely, integrated in with the LGBTQ, basically the rainbow mafia. And so, yeah, these radical left groups, what Andrew is pointing out, and what he's absolutely right on, is, these characters, they change their stripes every couple of years. They take on new identities. They form new groups. But they're the same people. And their goal is pretty much the same, which is to subvert, American ideas and destroy us from the inside. And thankfully, conservatives are starting to wake up to that fact. But back in, as I said, back in 2010, 2011, 2012, this was still groundbreaking to a lot of people. But there were also a lot of young conservatives at the time, teenagers and college students. Well, mostly teenagers who couldn't vote yet, and college students who, were apathetic to voting, who, this didn't resonate in for those of us who did resonate with in 2012, we couldn't do anything because we weren't of voting age yet, right? But in 2016, oh, you bet your ass it resonated with us. And I remember sharing this with like a lot of, my college students who they were thinking out voting for Trump because they were sick of all the woke shit that, had come out like 2 years before in Gamergate. And this was the speech that helped like bring them over to conservatism officially. And in 2024, I think Max and I, played some of this. Maybe I should do a version of the Right to Offend intro where I talk out, where we include Breitbart's speech too, because this is great. Max, if you are listening to this, by the way, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. So let me know, sir. You know how to get a hold of me. But yeah, this was a groundbreaking speech, but yeah, one that we needed to hear and one that still resonates today.
They are at war with you, and they attack you, and they throw eggs at you. And guess what? The media looks the other way.
Yep.
You're domestic terrorists, Janet Napolitano warned me about that. Yet when this group emerged, what happened? They exhibited traits that I'll probably get worst person of the year on a certain show. I don't even think that certain show exists anymore, so that's a dated joke. These people, they drive me a tad mad. Bernadine Dorn, as we ended our dinner, said something very important because she kept talking about the anti-war movement. In other parentheses, she also said she listens to ESPN's Mike and Mike. End parenthesis. Take that what you will. And this is my thesis, that the anti-war movement was never about anti-war. It was a Saul Alinsky community organizing tool to get Barack Obama and the left elected. It went away immediately. And the mainstream media created a narrative called the story of the year, Time magazine, but they will not tell you the true story of what happened. This is exactly the anti-war movement. How do I know this? If I tell that to ABC, CBS, and NBC, they say that's a conspiracy theory. This is just a bunch of organic people. There's no organization going on, even though we have the emails to prove it, or the undercover videos of Natasha Leonard from the New York Times orchestrating with the radicals. Oh, that didn't mean anything. It did mean a lot, actually. Bernadine Dorn told me while at our lovely dinner, when I was snarkily pointing out to her, whatever happened to the anti-war movement? And she let loose an affirmation of everything I know to be true. She says, well, that's not true. It's more or less that's what Occupy is. That's exactly what it is. The mainstream media refuses to tell you that these are the same shock troops that have been shocking us, pointing their fingers at us, trying to instigate riots with the police. These people are the definition of un-American. So you want a unity speech? You want a unity speech? I'll give you a unity speech. I don't care who our candidate is, and I haven't since the beginning of this. I haven't. Ask not what the candidate can do for you. Ask what you can do for the candidate. And that's what the Tea Party is. We are there to confront them on behalf of our candidate. I will march behind whoever our candidate is, because if we don't, we lose. There are two paths. There are two paths. One is America, and the other one is Occupy. One is America, the other one is Occupy. And I don't care. Along the way, and I'm not a candidate. I'm never going to be a candidate. I'm just a goofball from Los Angeles who wears goofy shoes. Promised people I would shave, didn't. Promised people I'd take a shower. I got too caught up talking to everybody. And here I am, kind of a mess, but kind of excited to be here. Because over the last 3 years, I've realized that the Republican Party and the conservative movement is not what ABC and CBS puts on the screen. They try to portray you in the worst possible light. And when I walk through CPAC, or I travel the United States to meet people in the Tea Party who care, black, white, gay, and straight, anyone that's willing to stand next to me to fight the progressive left, I will be in that bunker. And if you're not in that bunker because you're not satisfied with this candidate, more than shame on you, you're on the other side.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I was so blatantly against the Never Trump movement back in 2016. Because those of you who have been with me, since the 2010s, I know there are a few of you out there who have been with me for a long time. A long time. I know there's still those of you out there, folks. And by God, I love you to pieces. I do. There are some of you who will remember I was not the biggest Trump fan when he first, announced. I knew he had good ideas. But there were a lot of people who didn't think he was a serious candidate, and I was one of them. However, I'd always said that if he becomes the nominee, I will back him. And I played this clip. That 30-second clip, I played that for a lot of people. I had this clip pinned to my Twitter timeline for a year and a half. And I would always get into arguments with, Never Trumpers, some of whom knew Andrew, and some of whom, were, Ben Shapiro was one of them, actually. They would say, oh, that does not apply to Trump because Trump's not actually a conservative. That was what a lot of people would say. Ben was one of them, and again, regarding Ben Shapiro, I do respect him. I will always be, grateful that he came on my show. And it was an amazing experience. But, for him to say that Andrew Breitbart would have been Never Trump was absolutely despicable. And I'm not saying that Andrew would have necessarily loved everything about Trump either, but I think Andrew, if I had to guess, he would have been more like Max Sand and myself. He would have, seen the writing on the wall and he would have been like, well, Trump may be our best bet. And he really does understand, the culture war. And so, yeah, I played, I had that clip pinned to my, timeline for a year and a half of Breitbart, saying to support the candidate. I lost friends over my support of Trump. I even lost my girlfriend at the time because, she was a conservative in college, but she was one of the, the morally superior, quote unquote, never Trumpers. So, but, I would listen to this speech every week at that point in 2016 because I needed that to get me through that election season. And I needed it in 2024 as well. I mean, not as much in 24 because I had Max and Shmuley and the RTO crew, but yeah, I'll admit, even some of you guys probably remember I was really nervous in the weeks leading up to 2024, if you remember. And so, yeah, I watched this pretty regularly. And, for my money, Andrew still is the best. So, sir, take us home, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to tell you right now, I want to end it on a media bashing note because that will uplift me like a Dionne Warwick final rendition. We're watching you to play the race card, MSNBC. We saw how you cynically placed the Reverend Sharpton in a position of absurdist power. This is Dadaism. I learned that in college, that they would allow for this guy to have a show. This is Dadaism. It's freaky. It's Andy Kaufman. It doesn't make sense unless you understand what they're doing. This is going to be the dog whistle election cycle. They tested him in 2011, so he and his pal Toure and that punk Tim Jacob Wise and Ed and Maddow can sit there and call everyone who's Caucasian racist. I heard it. He used is instead of are. He's a racist. That's a dog whistle. Ignore it when Congressman Rand does it against Allen West. No more. We're going to go after you. I bought a dog whistle. I bought a dog whistle factory, and I'm giving you dog whistles. And we're going to listen to every word that comes out of your mouth, and we're going to hold you to the same standard that you hold to us, which is an impossible one, and you're going to have a hell of a time in 2012 because America has finally awoken to your Saul Alinsky bullshit tactics, and we're coming to get you. Thank you very much.
Andrew Breitbart, we miss you, sir. You were and still are a motherfucking legend, in my opinion, sir. And, boy, do I wish you were here. But I also hope that you will be proud of the way the conservative movement has gone. And, like people always ask me who I'd love, if there's one person I could interview, on the show who I haven't been able to, who would it be? And there are a few people, but like top on the list, at least as far as like notable figures go, I would have to say the top two people on my list without hesitation, ladies and gentlemen, Rush Limbaugh and Andrew Breitbart. If you want to know what makes me tick politically, and if you also know what makes me tick as far as, my understanding of media and communications, Rush Limbaugh and Andrew Breitbart. There you go. I just gave you the keys to understand my background. And so, yeah, as the title of this episode suggests, Andrew Breitbart's legacy does continue here, folks. It continues in, on multiple outlets. It continues in various independent journalists and commentators. And it continues right here on Right to Offend Media, folks. We confront the left with humor, antics, trolling, and just merriment. And, as Brendan O'Neill likes to say, and as Morpheus loves to say on the program, the right to offend is indeed essential. So, yeah. And anyway, we will be back, to offend, more on Wednesday. And boy, a lot of people on the left are offended this week, folks. So good time. So anyway, yeah, we will be back Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, on Rumble Video. Thanks to the people who tuned into the live stream tonight. We didn't have anyone in chat, but we had a couple people watching. Really appreciate that. Also, on Odyssey and X as well. For those who are listening on Spotify and podcast, really appreciate you as well, as always. Feel free to follow the links in the description and check out, the whole Right to Offend Media team. As always, you can pick up, my book on Amazon. Once again, Night of the Vigilante comes out March 25th. Early reviews are looking pretty good. One last final plug for my friend Luke Gossage, his book, Finding the Tall Grass, available now in paperback and ebook. So check that out as well. And, until Wednesday night, folks, have a good rest of your evening and a good day tomorrow. And we'll talk at you down the road. Take care, folks, and God bless.
The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Thank you for watching the Whitfield Report live on the Right to Offend Media Network. Make sure to check out Sam's books on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle. You can follow Sam on X at SamW_NGC and the Right to Offend Media Network at RTO Media. Like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. And until next time, God bless, God save this great nation. God, freedom, legacy, in that order.